So today, let's make this beautiful style, the one on the left, which I copied to make the one on the right. And this is actually the third time I'm making this particular style for people in a row, and I thought to share how I was able to achieve that. So if you're interested in that, make sure you watch this video to the very end because it's fully packed and exciting. And the very first thing you need to do is to draft your Princess Bustier, which I have a video of that on this channel. I even showed you two methods you can achieve a Princess Bustier. Now I'm going to just alter the neckline to 4 inches by 3.5, 4 inches width and 3.5 depth. And then for the yoke neckline, it's going to be 8.5, but we'll just leave it at this and then go to the back. After the back, we'll come back to the front. What I'm going to do is to add my darts, and if you want what is exactly on the thumbnail, shift your dart 1 inch inward. If you usually use 4 inches for your dart as your boss span, make it 5 inches or even 6 inches. The previous ones I made, I used that method, but this one, I just want to leave the dart exactly where it should be. So this dart area will be where the piece which will contain the eyelet will be going in. Okay, so I will now start from my center back tightening to get my waist measurement divided by 4 plus the dart intake allowance. And that's pretty much about the back. Next, I'm going to do 4 inches for the neckline, 4 inches width and 1.5 depth. And then for the yoke, I'm going to come down to the depth of the neckline for the back, which I use 9 inches. And then from this armhole part, you can just decide to connect it from where your armhole line stops, but I'll just come down by 6 inches and then connect it to that 9 inches, which is the depth of the back neckline, and that would be the back yoke. Next, I'm going to extend this dart line to that point, and then of course add my zipper allowance, not replace. Following the curve I have on that center back tightening, I'll just use it to add my 1 inch zipper allowance. Next, I'm just going to cut it out. The yoke is not going to contain any allowance, any zipper allowance or any allowance at all, because just as you can see, or just like you saw on the thumbnail, it's actually open, the yoke part. Now I'm going to slash open this dart for the front so I can be able to close the bust dart, and then I will use this paper tape to tape it down. Then I'm just going to blend the side measurement line and then continue the cutting. So this is more like a sew with me video in case you want to complain that it's fast. But trust me, if you watch this video to the very end, you will learn a lot, because this is just me showing how I make my simple gown, Ankara gown. So after cutting the front, I'll go over to the back and then cut it out. I'll cut through the lines that I have here and then cut off the back line, the center back tightening. I told you there would be no zipper allowance on the yoke part. Now I'll take the front piece, the center front and then the side piece like this, and I'm going to make sure that the bust points are matching up. The two bust points are matching up. Then I'm going to tape it down like so. I'll just tape it down all the way just to close it to the armhole part. Just as you can see it here, I'll tape it down. If you cannot do this alone, let somebody help you. Then I'm going to come here from our already existing neckline. I'll come down by 5.5. Okay, then I'm just going to use a free hand to blend it to where I want it to be. You can decide to measure from your shoulder tip to where you want to connect it to. You can also use your curve if you don't want to use free hand, but just blend. It doesn't have to be too sharp. The one you saw on the thumbnail is not that sharp. Okay, just have to give it this simple curve like this. After that, I'm just going to cut it out and then we proceed to the next stage. So this is just a simple way to create a yoke on your armhole Princess Bustier pattern. It's just simple. Just close it up, and that way it won't limit you to give it any style line that you want for the yoke. The way it would have limit you if you did not close it up. I don't know if you understand, But for the one we see on the thumbnail, it's the yoke is going towards the armhole, and that's why we have to close it up like this before we create the yoke. After that, I will just remove the paper tape on this center front and side piece, and of course the pattern is ready. So this will be the front yoke, which we'll be using our skin net to cut. Let's keep this pattern aside, and then we go ahead and cut the skirt part. And I'm using these 3 yards Ankara for this style. It's just 3 yards. It's not even up to 3 yards. It's about 4 inches shorter, but we are going to make it work. Now for the skirt, the whole length I'm working with is actually 45, which I'm going to make 48 here because of allowance. So 45, and I'll add extra 3 inches, making it 48. And then the half length is actually 17, but I'll mark 16 here. Okay, I'll mark it to this other side just to have a straight line, and then I'll connect it. After connecting, I'll start from this line to measure down to my hip line, which I'm using 9 inches for this case, and then go down to the knee line, which I'm using 20 inches for this case. Okay, so the knee line will be this point, this will be the hip line, and then I'll take my waist measurement on this part. My waist measurement divided by 4 plus extra 2 inches, and I will mark it. I don't usually add that to my skirt, especially if the person has a flat tummy. So I'll go to the hip line and measure my hip circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches allowance. Then I'll go to the knee and minus 2 inches from whatever value I have on that hip plus the allowance. Whatever I have there, I'll just minus 2 inches and do it on this knee part. Or you can also minus anything between 4 inches, 5 inches, or 6 inches from your hip circumference, and then divide that by 4 to get your knee measurement. Okay, then whatever I have on this knee part, I'll add half inch to the hem part, the full length part, and then you will see the shape. That you can just decide to make it straight, but I just want to create just a little amount of ease on that part. And that's basically it. I'll just go ahead and cut it out, then fold my fabric again to cut for the back. And as you can see, I've done that, and I placed the front pattern on it like so. And you can see from this center part that I have a space for the zipper allowance. Now what I'm going to do for that space is to go down to my hip line, which is 9 inches, and then I'll go down 6 inches from that 9 inches, and that would be the underbutt. Okay, so I'll come to this part and mark 1 inch. This is the waistline, right? I'll mark 1 inch, then go to the hip line, I'll mark 1.5. Then on this part, I'll mark 1 inch again. You can do 0.75 if you want. Then I'll continue with that 1 inch on all the way to the end. So this way, it will create just the same shape that the body has, and the person doesn't have to complain that it's too tight or she can't bend down while wearing her dress. I hope you understand. So it's going to give you the shape that you see here, and the other part will just be the same. I'll just go ahead and trace it out like so, and then cut through the mark that I have here, and you see this. Please notch the hip line and also the zip allowance, because as you can see, it's giving the same shape with the other side, so it doesn't confuse you. And at this point, I thought I was recording. I wanted to show you how to transfer your pattern to your fabric, but I think you can see it here. I just added half inch all around this center front, and then for the side, I added half inch joining allowance, and then on the side, I added 2 inches allowance, just like we did for the skirt part. Let me just use this one to show you how to do that. So I'm going to fold my fabric into 2. This fabric is folded here, and then I'll pin it down, pin the pattern on the fabric, give a space on this side here, so I will add my allowance. Next, I'm going to extend this vital line here, and on the then I'll add 2 inches allowance. I'll do the same thing for the waist, and that's just it. The other part will be half inch joining allowance, just as you can see me cut it out here. So half inch joining allowance, and then on the side we have our 2 inches allowance. Then on this part there won't be any allowance on the center back because we already have our zipper allowance, which is okay for us. And after I'm done, this is what I have. So I have the back piece and then the front piece ready, just like the down part. Now for the sleeve, what I have after cutting the bodice, I have about 47 inches, which is just 1 1/4. Okay, it will be okay for us. What I'm going to do is to take this edge and make it meet this other edge like so. So I'm using the whole length or yardage like so. I'm just making the two original mouth or selvage to meet, and then this is what I have. So I'm going to basically it's just 23 inches here because this Ankara is by 46. This one is 46. So I'm just going to fold it like this, and then I'll measure it to see what I have. And actually have the same thing both vertically and horizontally. Now what we'll be doing here is to just cut a full circle. But to determine the radius, what I'm going to do is to get the length here, and the length is actually 12 inches, which is the elbow line of the person, and I'm going to add extra 4 inches, making it 16 inches. So I'm going to place the 16 inches here and then measure all the way to where the measuring tape stops and mark it. Then I'll measure from this point, this tip here, to that point, and then whatever I have, I'm just going to mark it all around, and that would be the radius. Okay, so if the person is big, make sure that what you have on this radius will be will amount to the person round armhole measurement. I hope you understand. Then I'm going to mark 16 inches all around. Then on this part will be going to the armhole. Okay, so I'm going to minus 4 inches from that 16 inches which we have, and that would be 12 inches. Basically, whatever you use to curve your sleeve, just go ahead and minus it. I'm just trying to demonstrate. Let's say you use 4 inches to curve your sleeve like this. Just minus that 4 inches on this part. And note that it's not compulsory that it has to be this side that will be going to the armhole. I hope you understand. You can make it to be the other part, just minus 4 inches or whatever you use to curve your sleeve. Then I'm just going to mark 12 inches down, just not to waste the fabric, and add the rest to the radius and connect it like so. I hope I explained this well. So you're just going to cut it out, and if you have excess, you'll just be pleating that while fixing the sleeve to the armhole. By the time I'm done, I'll just open it on these two sides and notch the midpoint. And you see that we have two pieces here, which will serve for the both sleeves. What we have to cut now is the strip that goes to the sleeve, right? So I have just this piece remaining, which I'm just going to manage it anyhow it is. And I'm supposed to use 4 inches. I didn't have enough fabric left, but since I have just this, I'm just going to mark 3 inches. And note that this 3 inches that we are marking is just single. This is not on fold. The reason why I folded this is that I want to cut both for the front and both for the two sleeves. Okay, so I'm going to mark 3 inches, which is what this piece gives me. Don't mind the other extra that you're seeing because that part is not straight. Okay, so I'm going to connect it like so, just roll it out like that and then cut it out. After cutting, I'm just going to open it here to make it two. Can you see that? So this is what we have. We are going to fold it on one side, and then the other part will be joining it to the fabric. By the time you are done, you should have at least 1.5 left. And just like I said, I'm going to fold one side, use my hot iron to fold one side. Now what we'll do now is to cut the piece that the eyelet will be going to, where we'll be fixing the eyelet. I'm just going to measure what I have on this back piece here. You can measure any of the two, either this side or the center back. Okay, then whatever I have there, I'm just going to cut it out with this piece. I'm cutting for just one because this cannot give us two. Okay, so I want to make the height 2.5. You can do less or more depending on what you want, and then the length is actually 9 inches. After I'm done, I'm just going to measure it again, and I saw that it's actually I have actually 9.5 here. I'm going to just trim it off, which is a mistake on my part because after I trimmed it, notice that it shortened. It's no longer 9 inches, but I'm going to manage it like that. Now I'm going to use this to cut the other one, and then we cut the yoke. I already folded the two net. I'm using this skin two net, and it's actually on 4 folds. Okay, so I place the horizontal measurement going to that stretchy part. I hope you can see it. And then this length part is not stretchy, so it's important that you do that. Let the stretchy part be going to your side measurement or side body. Okay, let it be going to the side, and I'm going to cut it out. I only added allowance on the shoulder slope, just for joining, and the other part there is no allowance. So you can decide to make this 8, especially if the net you're working with is not that strong, but this 2 is okay for me. You can see I have 4 pieces here, meaning that it's just two for both the front and then the back. So I went ahead to cut the lining and then pressed paper stay on the needed part, just the upper bodice. And this is what we have. I have the back piece, and then I have that piece which will be going to the that area, middle back. Let's just call it middle back. To be going like this. Can you see that? And it will be facing the center back, just as you see it on the thumbnail. Okay, so you're going to turn it first. Don't worry, I'll show you later. I also have my side bust, side front, which I pressed paper stay and wording. This not the very softest, but this is soft too, just the soft wording. And we have it. Now for the skirt, I also went ahead to cut for the skirt, and the lining is shorter by 2 inches, just something like this, both for front and back. And I also cut out the lining for the down part. I'm just going to pleat the down part of this sleeve now, just the down part, and then I will leave the upper part. So by the time you'll be seeing this sleeve next, it must have been pleated on the hem part. Now for this part, this piece that will be containing the eyelet, I pressed 3 layers of paper stay. Other ones I pressed just 1 layer, then this one is 3 layers because I want it that thick. It has to be thick. Okay, then what I'm going to do next is to take this center back and then the side back. Then I'm going to fold this like this, close it on the the two end, and then leave the other part open. Okay, I'm going to close it like this. Make sure you blend it to the shape of your neckline, and after you are done, you're going to turn it to the right side, and then you place it, let it be going to the center back, just as you can see it here, and then you're going to close it. Do the same thing for the other side, and then you join your bustier. Place the center like this, and then place the side bust on it like so, and you're going to join it all the way to the top, and you start from the top on this part and close it all the way to the down. And after I was done, this is what I have. I wanted to iron it, give it a good press open the stitches, just as you can see it here, and it's giving. Can you see that? You should check out that tutorial which I showed you how to draft a princess bustier. I showed you 2 methods. You can choose any one that suits your preference. It's also very important to press open the stitches of your bustier to give it this neat finishing. So I went ahead to join the bar just like I showed you, and it seems like that piece is no longer visible, but it's actually it's there. Okay, so I closed it first before placing it on the center back, and then place the side back on it like that, and then join it together. So basically you just closed that. Now for the yoke, I went ahead to turn it. I used a normal thread, which is almost the same color with the two net, the skin two net. You can also use invisible thread, but my machine was not cooperating, so I had to use a normal thread. Thank God I had a normal thread. But this invisible thread is highly recommended. If not, for my machine, I usually use it because you won't know that there's any stitch there. So I'm going to place it like this, giving a 1 inch or 1.5 space on the center back, from the center back like this. Okay, can you see that space? Then I'm going to place the line and join it to the neckline, to the center back. Okay, join from the side to the center back, and then I'll do the same thing for this front. So it's important that you join both your lining and then the yoke together so that you won't have to have any smile line on the center. You know, that mid part of the yoke that usually has a smile line for some people. So for a yoke that is not too sharp like this, or that is not a plunging neckline, just join both the lining and then the yoke. Just stitch the three piece together. And trust me, if you try this method, you'll be addicted. It's very simple. So I'm going to pin it down like this. Make sure the center is going to the center. The three piece lining, yoke, and then the main fabric. Make sure that the center or the mid parts are matching up. Then you're going to pin it down and then you stitch it. Now, while stitching the back, make sure you do not stitch on that piece that will contain the eyelet. I don't know what to call that, but let's just call it a piece that will contain the eyelet. Make sure you do not stitch on it, okay? Instead of that, stitch with 0.25 instead of 0.5, so that by the time you turn the lining, it will, you know, take up the remaining 0.25, which is your added allowance, half-inch allowance for joining. So after joining, this is what I have. Can you see that? Even as I have not notched it, it's still very much flat, you know. There is no smile line or any wrinkle on that part. Can you see that? So this way your yoke will be neat in and out. This is how I join my yoke to give it that neat finishing. Now I'm going to top stitch. When you get to this midpoint here, you take up your machine feed and then shift it and start from this other part and stitch it all the way to this end. Do the same thing for this other part. Make sure you are holding the yoke and then the main fabric together. Just the lining will be separate and then you stop stitch on the lining to have something like this. Can you see that? You can choose to ignore this top stitching something. You can choose to ignore it if you want, but it's important. So if you have a steaming iron that cannot harm your skin net, please, you can skip that top stitching part. But because of the kind of iron I have at the moment, I had to top stitch so that even if I did not iron, it will still be flat. So you can see that we did a great job. Can you see? So you just knit in and out, both front and back. Okay, so let's work on this skirt part. And for this, I just went ahead to turn the down part, just the down part like this, and then I iron it. Can you see that? So what I'm going to do now is to fold this part to get the midpoint. I'll notch the midpoint and then do the same thing for the lining. I'll notch the midpoint like so. Then I'll take the upper bodice, the front, and then do the same thing. Notch the center and then notch the center of the lining too. Just like this. So after notching, I'm going to place the main fabric to the main fabric, that notch to notch, that's the center to center, midpoint to the midpoint, and I'm going to close it to the other end. Then I'm going to flip this lining part like so. Can you see that? I'm going to flip it like this, center to center. That notch will be matching up with the other notch, and then I'll pin it down on the center, and then I'm going to close it all the way to the other end. We want to do French seam, okay? Another method of having a neat inseam finish. So I'll do the same thing for this back here. I'll place this like this, the center back to the center back of the skirt, and make sure that it's matching up on this center part. It can be excess on the side, but on this center, let it be matching up. Then I'm going to flip the lining too, and then I'll close it. So after I was done, this is what I have. Can you see that? And then for the back, I wanted her to fix the zipper. I turned the center back. After doing what I showed you earlier, I turned the center back like so. Can you see that? Then I close it to from where I want the zipper to stop, and then close it to where I want the slit to start. And this is what I have. It's that simple. Now I'm going to take this front piece and I'm going to place it wrong side to wrong side, making sure that the front part, the right side like so, is facing you and also facing your table on the other part. Then you're going to pin it down, just make sure it's equal. If there's any excess, this is the time where you trim it out. Arrange it very well, and then as you arrange, you pin it down. Make sure that the waist seam that they are matching up to, just as you can see it here, and then you're going to pin it down all the way to the top. Don't worry if the armhole is not equal, you can just choose to trim it out. You can just trim it out, not choose if it's not the same. But make sure that this center part, this waist seam, that they are matching up like this. I'm just trying to open the seams here on this waistline, both the lining and then the main fabric, before pinning it down, so that by the time I stitched, it will be very flat on that part and not bulky. So after pinning it, I'll just go ahead and trim out this excess lining or fabric like you see it. Then I'm going to stitch it with 0.25. Please just stitch it with 0.5. We added 2 inches as seam allowance instead of 1.5. So that just use that halving to stitch it. And after that, you trim it very nicely, very thinly, to have something like this. Can you see this? So this is how the inside looks like, and then this is the inside. Let me just zoom it to show you how thin the trimming is. Can you see that? Just trim yours like that so that it's just very flat. I also ironed it. After stitching it on the outside, I ironed it. That's why it's this smooth. Can you see that shape? Now let's go ahead and take the measurement. I'll measure on this back my bust measurement divided by 2, and then whatever I have left, I'll just share it into 2 on the 2 sides. Now this is how you take your bustier measurement. You're just going to take it on the front part, make sure it's cupped like this. Then you're going to measure your round bust divided by 2, and then you measure what you have from that point, and then divide whatever you have, whatever value you have, divide it and share it on the 2 sides. Repeat the same thing on the waist. Your waist circumference divided by 2, and for this case I'm working with 30 inches, so that's 15. And then whatever I have, I'll measure it and share it on both sides. And that's how I do my measurements. I'll connect from the bust to the waist, then go to the hip and do the same thing. Hip measurement divided by 2. I would mark it down, then measure what I have from that point, and whatever value I have, I'll divide it by 2 and share it on both sides. It's that simple. Now go to the knee, or you just connect it like this to the knee, but just remember we minus 6 inches from our hip circumference to get the knee measurement. So I'm going to divide that on this knee part. That would be, I'm working with a hip of 42, and 42 minus 6 will be 36 inches. So I'll divide that 36 inches here. So basically I'll just mark 18 inches here, then measure what I have left and share that into 2. I think I have about 1.25 or 1.5. Then I'll just mark it straight to the end. You remember there's a shape at the hem part, just go ahead and mark that 1.2 inches that you have on the knee there too. Then you're going to stitch it to have something like this. Can you see? If you've been following me on this channel, you know I'm actually addicted to inseam finishing, but I usually do this method, especially for somebody like this. I don't have a measurement, I'm just guessing through her pictures, and she's far away from where I am. So this way it will be easier for her to take this dress to another tailor to fix it for her, or reduce or close it more if it's tight or loose. It will be easier for that tailor. Okay, now we are back to the sleeve, and like I told you, the next time you'll be meeting this sleeve, it will be pleated on the hem part. You can go ahead and gather if you want, but you know how I feel about gathers. So I just pleated with my round sleeve measurement. Now I'm going to repeat the same French seam measurement, French seam that we did for the bodice, just to have something like this. You can see it's already giving us that puffy effect. Can you see that? So I pleated the hem, just the hem yet, with the round sleeve measurement. Now I'm going to take the strip that I told you I'll be folding on one part, just one part of it, and I'm gonna have to fold it on that part. Now I'm going to notch the midpoint and then take this sleeve. You see that part that has joining, that part that should be going to the armhole, that will be serving as the mid part for this dress. For the so that's where I'll be placing this center part of the strip. Then I will also get the midpoint, fold it from that point that we stitch, that we close this sleeve from. I'll fold it and get the midpoint of the sleeve too. Then I'm placing the midpoint of this strip on that point that we close the sleeve from, and I'm going to stitch it until I get to that part that I notched as the midpoint of this sleeve. I don't know if you understand. Then I'll continue on the other part and stitch it to meet that part too. So after you are done, it's going to be like this. Can you see? Remember, you're stitching from the inside to the outside. Place your strip right side to the wrong side of the sleeve, and then you're going to stitch it. Just make sure you have something like this when you're done. Can you see that? Can you see? So what I'm going to do now is to fold this strip into two like this. Then I'm going to stitch it very like 0.25. Close it with 0.25 all the way to this point. Make sure you close it as close as possible to that midpoint of the sleeve. I don't know if you understand. After you are done closing, you should have something like this. Can you see? Remember to also close the edge, and then you're going to turn it to the right side like so. It's very simple. Just turn it to the right side and then poke out the edges, the two sharp points. Turn the other side too, and then you're going to place it like this and top stitch on it. Okay, make sure that as you're top stitching, you are not folding the fabric under the strip under. Make sure it's very smooth on the under too, as it is on the upper part. You're going to stitch it to have something like this. I want to fix it to the armhole, which is pretty much simple. It's not complicated. So you're going to fix it to the armhole, and then if there is excess, you're going to pleat it. Now for this part, I'm going to use hemming gum to gum it, just to give it a very neat finishing. I think I'll do a separate tutorial on that. I have a tutorial coming up about that. And then for this armhole, you're going to also iron it. Please be gentle while you're ironing. You can use a piece of cloth and then iron the seam, that seam that you used to join the sleeve. Iron it to the sleeve part so that it's invisible on the net part. I hope you understand. And then you're just going to go ahead and fix the eyelet on this point. Of course, your dress is ready. So I'll be fixing 5 of it, eyelet 5 on this part, and then I'll be using a bias ribbon for lacing. And lastly, fix your button here, elastic on one of it and then the button on the other side, and that's just the end of it. So this is what it looks like. I couldn't get a picture of that or video of that before I sent it out because it was an urgent work, but this is for the same person and I just use the same method. The only difference is that this lacing stuff goes 1 inch away from where my dart is supposed to be, and that's just the only difference. And here we come to the end of this tutorial. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and I will see you on my next one. Be good. Bye.